playoff season, but instead of tracking brackets and scores, my class has been focused on a very different championship. Which version of Robin Hood tells the story best? The kids have been asking for Robin Hood as read aloud for months, so I pulled a few copies from the library to see which would capture their attention first. Of course, once we finished one, they wanted the others. Apple Classics and Great Illustrated Classics came first, then my copy of Howard Pyle's original got pulled in, and then eventually one of the kids even brought their own Disney version from home. It was the perfect setup for comparison and contrast, every librarian's dream. And while all these versions tell the same story at heart, they each bring something very different to the page. Tone, language, illustrations, and even the way the characters feel. Before I knew it, what started as a simple read aloud turned into debates, side-by-side observations, and a full-blown rabbit trail. My classroom had its very own playoff season, just with bows and arrows instead of footballs. Why Robin Hood still matters to me. As a little girl, libraries felt magical. Books weren't just objects on the shelf. They were portals to other worlds, invitations to leave the everyday behind and step into a grand adventure, another world where anything could happen. To an extent, I still feel that way. Of all the books that have whisked me away to other worlds, Robin Hood is among the most quintessential. Sherwood Forest, Greenwood, outlaws, feasts, disguises, archery contests. A place that feels alive in a way that's hard to describe. As Howard Pyle himself says in the preface, "This country is not fairyland. What is it? 'Tis the land of fancy, and is of that pleasant kind that, when you tire of it, whisk, you can clasp the leaves of this book together and 'tis gone, and you are ready for everyday life with no harm done. And now I lift the curtain that hangs between here and no man's land. Will you come with me, sweet reader? Give me your hand." That invitation to step into the land of fancy and then return home at will is exactly how reading Robin Hood feels to me, even now. It brings back the little girl version of me who truly believed a book could take her someplace real. Reading Robin Hood still feels like being that little girl again, transported, captivated, and completely wrapped up in the world on the page. Growing up with Robin Hood, from Big Brother to overgrown 8-year-old. When I was little, Robin Hood felt like someone I could look up to. Brave, funny, strong, protective. He was like an uncle or a big brother, someone older who seemed to know exactly what he was doing. Now, reading him as an adult, I notice more layers. I still see his compassion, leadership, honor, and chivalry, but I also see impulsiveness, recklessness, endless brawls, and a few questionable decisions. He feels like an overgrown 8-year-old, full of heart and good intentions, but with so much left to learn. That mix of heroism and immaturity is exactly why different versions of Robin Hood hit so differently. Each retelling emphasizes different sides of him, and that changes how the story lands for kids, or for the grown-ups reading along. Howard Pyle's Robin Hood, the original. Before judging adaptations, you have to sit with the original. First published in 1883, Howard Pyle's The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood isn't a novel in the modern sense. It's more like a fireside collection of tales, episodic by design. Each chapter stands on its own, meant to be enjoyed one at a time rather than consumed all at once. Reading it straight through can feel repetitive, but that's part of the charm. Each story is an individual adventure you can savor, like visiting old friends in Sherwood Forest. I'd actually recommend not reading this collection all at once. If it were me, I'd sit down with maybe a chapter a week and really enjoy it. Almost like a weekly TV show everyone gathers around to watch. Bonus points if you're reading it aloud with family or friends. Doing it this way, the repetition becomes comforting instead of tedious, and the stories start to feel alive, familiar, and endlessly inviting. Maid Marian, barely there, and that's telling. One detail that genuinely surprised my students was how little Maid Marian actually appears in Howard Pyle's Robin Hood. She's mentioned briefly early on, but more as an idea than a presence. There's no tidy romance arc, no swooning, no wedding bells at the end of the story. And that absence feels intentional. Pyle doesn't seem particularly interested in romance. He's interested in legend. His focus stays on adventure, loyalty, honor, and the rhythm of old stories passed from one generation to the next. Marian's near absence helps keep the story centered on the forest, the fellowship, and the larger myth rather than on a single romantic thread. Wealth, class, and moral simplicity. One place Howard Pyle consistently frustrated me was how cleanly he draws the moral lines. Again and again, the rich are portrayed as cruel, greedy, or corrupt, while the poor are painted as virtuous, honest, and deserving. That oversimplification bothered me a bit. Money, after all, is just a resource. It's like bricks. You can build a school or a hospital with them, or you can throw one of them through someone's window. Wealth itself isn't the issue. Character is. That said, I found myself genuinely curious about the world Pyle was writing in. Published in 1883, his Robin Hood reflects real class tensions of the time. The story functions as protest folklore, a way of pushing back against abuses of power and unfair systems. In that context, the sharp divide between rich and poor makes more sense, even if it still feels a bit too neat. And then Pyle does something interesting. There's an entire chapter devoted to a group of beggars who appear poor and disabled, but aren't. They're swindlers, criminals, violent. They fake injuries, deceive others, and eventually attack Robin. That chapter stopped me in my tracks. It felt like Pyle quietly complicating his own moral framework. In that moment, virtue isn't tied to class at all. It's tied to character. Being poor doesn't make someone good any more than being wealthy makes someone evil. This small section of the book is an important one. It suggests that even within Pyle's simplified moral world, he knew the lines weren't quite as clear as he often drew them. Violence, consequences, and the ending. Pyle doesn't sanitize his story. Violence exists. Betrayal exists. Death exists. Fights aren't always playful. Consequences aren't always reversible, and Robin's story doesn't end sweetly. The traditional ballad ending, betrayal, bloodletting, death, remains intact. There's no gentle fade out, no tidy resolution where everyone lives happily ever after. Robin Hood is a legend, not a fairy tale, and Pyle treats him accordingly. That matters because every modern retelling reacts to this, softening it, reshaping it, or rewriting it entirely. To understand why later versions change what they change, you first have to sit with the weight of Pyle's ending and accept the original story and that it was never meant to be comfortable. The classroom experiment. 4 Robin Hoods enter the arena. With all that in mind, my class and I decided to put Robin Hood to the test. What started as a simple read aloud quickly turned into a full-on experiment. We didn't just stick to one book. We had Apple Classics, Great Illustrated Classics, and the Disney version all in play. Every story got a reaction, laughs, gasps, questions, and lots of, wait, what just happened? Moments. We noticed what stayed the same, what changed, and how those changes made the story feel different. I read Howard Pyle on my own, and that gave me a few extra points to throw into the mix. As a group, we asked questions like, which version makes Robin the cleverest? Which one's the easiest to follow? Which one surprises us? We weren't picking favorites yet. We were noticing, comparing, and just soaking in how each telling gave us a little something different. That curiosity became the lens for everything we did after that. Apple Classics, a thoughtful translation. Apple Classics does a beautiful job keeping the spirit of Pyle's original while making it approachable for kids. It retains some of the Old English flavor, which meant I had to translate aloud as I read, but that only added to the charm. The story softens the violence, maintains ambiguity, and the illustrations, which are spread every few pages, are tasteful, enhancing the text without overwhelming it. Maid Marian isn't central. She barely appears and never drives the plot, similar to Pyle's original, which I love. For kids, that keeps the story focused on Robin's adventures without romantic drama. Apple Classics does take things a step further, though, and Robin and Marian do eventually get married. But this is done quietly, naturally, and it's rather understated. It works without overshadowing the adventures, keeping Marian a background presence rather than a plot device. The ending is what I loved most. King Richard comes to Sherwood and offers Robin and his men a place in his service, with the freedom to return to the forest whenever they choose. It closes on a note of happy uncertainty, letting readers imagine the years that follow. As for the days and years that followed, who can rightly say? For some think Robin was happy in the king's service, and others say he yearned for Sherwood. Some say that on nights when the moon is round, 3 clear notes can be heard echoing from the greenwood. What do ye say, dear reader? I'm a sucker for happy endings, and this one just felt right. In some ways, even truer to the heart of Robin Hood than Pyle's original. Overall, Apple Classics felt like the work of someone who truly loved the original and wanted to share it without changing its heart. It's my personal favorite for kids. They responded to it, and it sparks curiosity and conversation while keeping Robin approachable and engaging. It bridges the gap between Pyle and younger readers beautifully, offering both story and substance in a way that invites children to fall in love with the legend itself. Great illustrated classics, when simplifying goes too far. The book does succeed in one big way. It's written in plain, modern English, making it easy for kids to follow and even suitable for mid-elementary independent reading. It felt a bit like a SparkNotes version, told mostly correctly with large child-friendly text. The plot jumps around a lot so that the story's heart gets a bit lost in my view. The sheriff feels more like a cartoonish figure than a formidable opponent. Simplified, not necessarily bad. Some scenes are skipped entirely and a few details are just wrong. For example, King Henry's men didn't pursue Robin after the archery contest. Queen Eleanor arranged a 40-day pardon. And for a series called Great Illustrated Classics, I expected more colorful, detailed illustrations. But the book offers only simply black and white sketches. Plentiful, yet, in my view, a bit forgettable. Violence isn't sugar-coated, and while I can appreciate the reality of consequences, here it landed a little harsh. Robin's death is quick and brutal. His cousin betrays him, ties him up, slits a vein, and he's gone before Little John can do anything about it. The story leaves little room to feel the impact. It's just kind of over. I really wanted to connect with this version. I did. The kids enjoyed the pictures, even if they weren't great, but the story itself felt thin, and the ending left us all shaking our heads. As one second grader exclaimed, "What? That's the most stupidest ending ever. It wasn't happy at all." I can't judge the entire Great Illustrated Classics series based on this one book, but honestly, after this experience, I'm hesitant to pick up another. Disney's Robin Hood, the version most of us remember. Disney didn't adapt Howard Pyle. It adapted our collective memory of Robin Hood. It's a cute story, but a very different Robin Hood than Pyle wrote. Prince John is elevated, Marian is more central, humor comes first, and animals soften every moment. Heroes and villains are crystal clear, and the story is safe for young eyes. This version is perfect for a family movie night with popcorn, full of laughs and charming woodland antics. The kids were delighted, and it's easy to see why this version of Robin Hood is something most of us remember. But don't be fooled. This is not the Robin Hood of Sherwood Forest or the legend Pyle tells. What Disney really shows us is who we want Robin Hood to be: clever, charming, and utterly entertaining. So, which Robin Hood wins the battle of the books? It really depends on who you are and what you're looking for. If you want nostalgia and depth, Howard Pyle is unbeatable. Reading him feels like stepping into a world where every chapter is a little adventure, best savored slowly. Maybe one tale a week, ideally read aloud with family or friends. It's not for binging, but for lingering in the story, letting the legend sink in. For read-alouds with kids, Apple Classics hits the sweet spot. I had to translate some of the Old English phrases aloud, but the story stays true to the characters and the arc of Robin's adventures. Violence is softened, the pacing is tight, and it ends on a happy note without losing the essence of the legend. My students connected instantly and were completely wrapped up in it. For independent readers, Great Illustrated Classics works for language and readability, and the pictures are plentiful. But the plot and characters are so condensed and jumpy that much of the story's heart is lost. The kids enjoyed the illustrations, but the ending left us all scratching our heads. It just didn't have the same weight or magic. And for family movie night, Disney's Robin Hood is pure fun. It has almost nothing to do with Pyle's Robin Hood, but if you want charming woodland animals, humor first, and a very clear line between heroes and villains, it's entertaining. Just don't expect the legend as it was written. Ultimately, the best Robin Hood is the one that fits your eyes, your heart, and the moment you're in when you meet him. I'll always return to Sherwood. The kids and I had a blast in this year's epic Battle of the Books, and we'd love to hear from you. Which classic should we put to the test next? I've loved Robin Hood and Sherwood Forest since I was a little girl. Even as an adult, stepping into Sherwood Forest feels like being that little girl again, transported, captivated, and wrapped up in a world that somehow feels alive. With adult eyes, I notice Robin's flaws. Yet the story's heart, its sense of possibility and adventure never fades. Robin Hood may be reckless, imperfect, and frustrating at times, but he still knows the way back to Sherwood. And somehow, so do I. That's all for now. Take care, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.